Now, this is a difficult one. A soldier who mistakenly shot a child whilst on duty waited 5 years for therapy, but then ultimately he took his own life.
Yeah, he was called George Preez, and he developed PTSD after the incident, which was in 2011. His wife says he didn't know he was firing at a child at the time. Now, meanwhile, the Army say that service personnel health is taken extremely seriously, and they won't comment on the specifics of individual cases, but it prompts a question that we talk about quite a lot, doesn't it? Do we do enough in this country to support our veterans?
Well, let's talk to one of those veterans, Johnston, who joins us this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
I mean, look, there seems to be a pretty clear question, a pretty clear answer to this, I beg your pardon, that we just don't.
I think we're doing more today than ever before. I came out the military in '95 with a crush injury. I was very, very disappointed. I wanted to do a full 22-year career. And there was very little information available, the Royal British Legion in your local regiment. As for health, mental health, one wouldn't have known where to turn to. And a lot of people dealt with it internally because they didn't want to talk about it. There wasn't that platform to say, let's talk about what's bothering inside. So, yeah, it was a struggle for not only me, but for a lot of veterans. Not all. A lot of guys and girls come out, as they went in. But I think we're doing more today than we have ever done in the past.
But when it comes to mental health, a lot of the work that is being done by charities.
You're absolutely right, Stephen. And I was very fortunate. I connected with Combat Stress back in the day. How
did you know about them?
I went to a GP eventually. My wife just dragged me down there saying, something's not right, you've got to start talking. And she had a lot of empathy and connection to the armed forces and said, I think you need to be talking to these people at Combat Stress. So I did, and I had a journey with them to get me back on my feet.
You said your wife was clearly worried about you. In what way? What were you doing, saying, being? Oh,
it was terrible. It's early morning, but I came out of the military and I couldn't reconnect. And I know this is a very, very common thing with lots of vets. I couldn't connect. I couldn't pick up where I'd left off 12 years before. I'd been on 2 tours of duty. I'd been with a family like no other. They watched my back as I watched theirs, without even thinking about it. And then suddenly, when you come out and you're in Civvy Street and you think you're going to do it again and connect back in. No, it's difficult because nobody speaks your language, and I don't mean the English language, I mean that military jargon. Nobody supports you. You get paranoid, and one of the dangers is alcohol. You think that's... I mean, we used to drink all the time in the military. You drink on good occasions and bad, and you thought that was the thing to say, the saviour, if you will. Well, it's not. It takes you down a very, very dark path. So I kicked about, couldn't get a job, couldn't settle, couldn't have relationships with people. I didn't trust them. It was my wife who came in, and I finally opened the door to myself. But also, I spent 10 weeks in a secure hospital, and I was astonished. Now, I remember being in there, Anne, and I'm thinking... I cried. I thought, what? When I joined the army, I was the happiest bloke in the world, and I came out and I thought,
how can it come to this?
Why am I like this today? But I fought back, and I do a lot of work today. I do a lot of black tie events, talk about it, get people back on the feet, because I know you can get out of it. It's a bit of support. But
the interesting thing is, though, it's not. I mean, obviously there are people who suffer because of what they've seen and what they've been through, and perhaps we understand. People who aren't connected to the armed forces can be a bit more sympathetic to that. But there's also just those people who may not have seen a lot of combat, but essentially you become institutionalised.
That's exactly it, Steve. You're absolutely right. My problems wasn't necessarily the fact that I've been on tours of duty. It was the paranoia. I was in for 12 years when we had the IRA days, and every time...
You served in Northern Ireland, didn't you?
Twice, yeah, in the early 80s. But we searched our camps, not our camps, our cars going in and out all the time. It was just normal. When I first joined the army in '83, the IRA bombed the guardroom at 3 in the morning. That was my welcome to the British Army. But that didn't bother you at the time. It's when you came out and you're still searching your car a year later and you're wondering, why am I still on the back foot?
Well, I tell you what I hear as well is that a lot of people who come out of the armed forces, they may be going through all sorts of struggles to reintegrate it, but they also are a bit aware that there are some people, ordinary people in the street, who are very anti them because they've served. I mean, I can't believe the attitude in our country sometimes.
It's very different.
People who have been soldiers.
Very different, isn't it? I remember as a kid going in the early 80s, whenever you went into a pub in the UK, people would buy you a drink. And go on, son, and when you're going back, and that's the general question. Very different now. I remember a time where we couldn't travel in uniform.
That's right.
Because it was identified as being as Britain's
Why have we changed?
I just think it's the way of the generation, and I think we're living in different times now. It's not the same. The world is changing fast in front of our face. We see that. But that brings us back to the health now, mental health with veterans. I do a lot of work with a fellow veteran. We have a YouTube channel called On Parade UK, and we talk and bring veterans together. And we've recorded a lot of interviews to talk to veterans. And in doing so, we've connected with the NHS, the Veterans NHS. We do a lot of work with them. They support us. And that's nice because guys can connect with us and say, yeah, thanks for the channel. That's really helpful. And it's about that. It's about talking. You've got to talk to each other.
So what would you say to either someone watching who's veteran or currently serving, or indeed a family member who's worried about someone? How do you get them to start the journey? Because actually, often it's the first step that is the most difficult.
Yeah. If it's a veteran issue, I would call an organisation called Veterans Gateway. They're like the umbrella of charities. Pop a call into them. It's a free phone number. They will be able to get you to where you need to go and connect you. If you go online, you will find certain numbers across the UK for Op Courage. Now, Op Courage is the new service. It's been running a few years now. It's fabulous. And I'm going back to the story of the lad who took his life. I mean, that's just tragic. And
5 years he was waiting.
It's terrible. It's terrible, Anne. It's absolutely shocking. And I feel that pain every time someone takes the life, even if they're not ex-military, because I know, had he got that support, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. But it is sad. I've lost 3 friends in my small circle who've taken their lives, and that's tragic as well. So how big's the problem?
Yes,
far bigger than we.
But you know, you were mentioning that umbrella organisation that covers all of the sort of charities that might help with this. If you're a soldier at the moment and you're probably going to come out of the service and go back into civilian life, will somebody tell you about that organisation, even if you don't need it? Will you be given information about that?
I think there's always pressure to do more for when you leave the military, and I believe I haven't spoken to anybody who's recently left the military, but I know that they're very aware of it. There's conversations with Veterans NHS all the time. They meet often, they discuss current issues. Is it working right? They're working very closely with GPs now. So if you go into your GP, you will be able to produce your ID card, your Veterans ID card, which is still being rolled out, and connect with a GP. And I think one of the questions they'll ask you in a hospital or a GP is, have you served in the military? So that we can identify any underlying issues. So but it's always lots of work to do. I think we've got to keep pushing hard, and not just for veterans, for everybody, I think. I mean, mental health for all of us, and we've got to get it right.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right on that.
I do think we should be more caring. Exactly. We should be more caring to our vets. Gosh, we all owe them.
Yeah, look, really good to see you, Sean.
Bless you.
Thank you very much indeed. And although Sean mentioned all those various issues and things that your groups that you can talk to, help is always available from the Samaritans, I should say, whether you're a veteran, armed forces or not, and they will listen to you without any judgment or any condemnation, whatever you've got to say to them. You can just call them on 116 123 or go to samaritans.org.